The station floated in the darkness between three dying stars. Prime was the oldest neutral ground in the galaxy, a place where empires had signed treaties and ended wars for over 100,000 years. Today it held representatives from 12 of the most powerful species in known space. They had come to discuss a problem. That problem was humanity. Ambassador stood at the center of the great council chamber. His gray skin reflected the dim lights above him. His four eyes moved slowly across the gathered delegates. The hegemony had ruled this sector for 10,000 years and had served as their voice for 3 centuries. He had seen species rise and fall. He had watched civilizations burn themselves to ash, but he had never seen anything like the humans. "They have entered the restricted sectors," said. His voice was calm but carried the weight of deep concern. "Sector 7, Sector 12, Sector 19, all within the last solar cycle." Murmurs filled the chamber. The delegation, tall creatures with clicking mandibles, shifted nervously. The ancient beings of living crystal hummed with frequencies that indicated alarm. Even the who communicated only through telepathy projected waves of unease that everyone could feel. "The humans grow too fast," said High Prelate of the collective. 200 years, only 200 years since they left there. They should still be learning to navigate between stars. Instead, they build weapons that rival our own. "They do not rival our weapons," said a deep voice from the section. "They exceed them." The chamber fell silent. No one wanted to admit this truth, but it hung in the air like poison. Raised one of his four hands. "This is why we have called this summit. The coalition must act. We must contain the human expansion before it is too late." The great doors at the far end of the chamber opened. Every alien head turned. Every eye focused on the two figures walking toward the council floor. Commander Jake wore the dark blue uniform of the Earth Defense Fleet. He was not a tall man, but he walked with a confidence that made the massive alien step back. His brown hair was cut short in military fashion. His green eyes moved across the room, taking in every detail, every threat, every opportunity. Beside him walked Lieutenant Amy Torres. She was younger, with dark hair pulled back tight and sharp features that missed nothing. Jake stopped at the speaker's platform. He looked up at the assembled powers of the galaxy. These beings had conquered star systems when humanity was still learning to make fire. They had technology that could crack planets in half, and they were afraid of him. "Ambassadors," Jake said, his voice was steady. "Thank you for the invitation." "You were not invited," Commander replied. "You were summoned." Jake smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Humans do not answer summons, Ambassador. We accept invitations. There is a difference." The High Prelate clicked his mandibles in what might have been laughter or anger. "You speak boldly for a species that is barely out of its infancy." "We learn fast," Jake said simply. Amy stood slightly behind him, her hand resting casually near her sidearm. She knew they were not in danger. The coalition followed ancient laws of diplomacy. No blood could be spilled on Prime, but old habits died hard, and she had not survived 15 combat deployments by being careless. Activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air above the council floor. Human ships, human colonies, human soldiers in powered armor storming alien positions. "You have expanded into 3 restricted sectors," said. "You have established 17 new colonies without coalition approval. You have deployed military assets in neutral space. These are violations of the Galactic Compact." Jake studied the images for a moment. Then he shook his head. "We have violated nothing. The Galactic Compact requires species to seek approval before colonizing inhabited systems. Every world we have settled was empty. Every sector we have entered was abandoned. We followed your laws to the letter." "The spirit of the law," the representative rumbled. "Is not the law," Jake finished. "If you wanted us to stay in a box, you should have written clearer rules." Felt his secondary hearts beating faster. This was what made humans so dangerous. They did not fight with weapons alone. They fought with words, with ideas, with an understanding of systems that bordered on terrifying. They found the cracks in everything and pushed through. The coalition demands that humanity halt all expansion, announced. You will submit to oversight. You will allow coalition inspectors access to your military facilities. You will accept limits on your fleet construction. Jake did not blink, no. The single word echoed through the chamber. Several delegates gasped. The projected pure shock. No species had ever refused a direct coalition demand. You cannot refuse, High Prelate said. The coalition represents the combined might of 12 spacefaring civilizations. We could crush your species in a single campaign. You could try, Jake said, but you would lose, and somewhere deep in your ancient minds you know this. That is why you called this meeting. That is why you tried to use words instead of weapons, because you looked at humanity and you did something your species has not done in 10,000 years. You felt fear. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in a dozen languages. Threats were made. Ancient grudges were voiced. But through it all, Jake stood perfectly still, perfectly calm. Then the alarms began. Every screen in the chamber flashed red. Every communication device screamed with incoming signals. The chaos of argument transformed into the chaos of panic. Accessed his personal terminal. His gray skin went pale. Impossible, he whispered. What is it? Jake demanded. The ambassador looked at the human with an expression that mixed terror with desperate hope. Research Station Omega-7. It is gone, not destroyed, consumed. The readings indicate biological matter, organic ships, a hive signature we have not seen in 50,000 years. Amy stepped forward. What does that mean? Four eyes met Jake's too. In that moment, all the politics, all the threats, all the ancient rivalries meant nothing. The Devourers have returned, said. The species that nearly ended all life in this galaxy has awakened, and we have no defense against them. Jake looked at Amy. She looked back at him. They both understood what this meant. The coalition had just gone from wanting to contain humanity to needing humanity. The most dangerous species in the galaxy was about to prove exactly why they had earned that title. Tell me everything, Jake said, and pray to whatever gods you worship that humans are as dangerous as you fear. Relentless dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the debris field. Captain Cole stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back as he studied the destruction before him. He had seen battlefields. He had seen the aftermath of orbital bombardments, but he had never seen anything like this. Research Station Omega-7 had been a massive structure, 3 kilometers across, home to over 2,000 scientists from 6 different species. It had contained some of the most advanced laboratories in Coalition space. Now it was nothing but twisted metal and frozen corpses drifting in the void. Sensors are picking up organic residue throughout the debris field, said Dr. Kate from her station. She was the ship's science officer, a woman in her early 30s with red hair and tired eyes. She had been awake for 20 hours trying to understand the readings they were receiving. This is not normal battle damage. The station was not destroyed, Captain. It was eaten. Chief Engineer Ben looked up from his console. He was a stocky man with graying hair and hands that had built and repaired more ships than most people would see in a lifetime. Eaten. What kind of weapon eats a space station? Not a weapon, Kate said quietly. A species. Turn to face her. Explain. Kate transferred her data to the main. Complex molecular structures appeared alongside energy signatures and biological markers. The residue matches nothing in our databases. I had to search the Coalition historical archives. These readings match something that was recorded over 50,000 years ago, during what the elder species call the Long Night. The Devourers, said Sergeant Price. She stood near the tactical station, her arms crossed over her chest. She was the ship's weapons specialist, a tall woman with short hair and scars on her hands from too many close-quarters battles. I thought they were extinct. So did everyone else, Kate replied. The Coalition records indicate that the Devourers were a hive-mind organism, not just a species but a living weapon, possibly engineered by some ancient civilization that has been forgotten by history. They consumed everything, entire worlds, entire systems. The elder species barely survived. It took the combined might of every civilization in the galaxy to push them back into dark space. Studied the data on the screen. If they were defeated once, they can be defeated again. Perhaps, Kate said, but there is something else. These readings are different from the historical records. The Devourers from 50,000 years ago were essentially mindless. They consumed without strategy, without planning. They were like a plague, spreading wherever resources existed. And now, Kate hesitated before answering. The attack pattern on the station shows coordination, planning. They disabled the communication arrays first, then the defense systems, then the escape pods. They did not just consume this station, Captain. They hunted it. The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. A mindless plague was terrifying enough. An intelligent plague was something far worse. "Sir," called the communications officer, a young man named Tim Porter. "We are receiving a transmission from Coalition Command. Ambassador is requesting a direct link." Nodded, put him through. The ambassador's gray face appeared on the. His 4 eyes looked haunted. Behind him could see Coalition officers rushing back and forth in obvious panic. Captain Cole said, "What have you found?" "Your ancient enemy is back, Ambassador, and it has learned some new tricks." Closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, there was something in his expression that had never seen in an alien before. It was despair. Complete and total despair. "You do not understand," said. "When the Devourers came the first time, my ancestors were young, strong, ready to fight. The long night lasted for 1,000 years. We lost 90% of all sentient life in the galaxy. Worlds that had thrived for millions of years were reduced to barren rocks. The species that survived, the 12 who now make up the Coalition, they have never forgotten. The terror is in our genetic memory. Our children wake screaming from nightmares about creatures they have never seen." Felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "What are you telling me, Ambassador?" "I am telling you that my people cannot fight this war. They cannot fight. They cannot fight. When our leaders saw the readings from your ship, they did not call for, they called for evacuation. The ancient fear has paralyzed us." Stepped forward. "That is insane. You have fleets, armies, technology that took you to develop. And none of it matters when your soldiers cannot pull a trigger because their hands are shaking too hard," replied. "You humans, you have no memory of the long night. You do not know what it means to face a devourer swarm. This is not a weakness to us. It is survival instinct. Our ancestors learned to run, to hide, to survive until the threat passed. That instinct is stronger than any training, any discipline, any oath of service." Exchanged looks with his crew. He saw the same thought in all their eyes. These ancient species, these powerful civilizations that had ruled the stars for longer than humanity had existed, they were giving up. They were going to let the Devourers consume everything rather than face their fear. "There is something else you should know," Kate said. She was still studying her readings, her face pale. "I have been tracking the residual hyperspace signatures. The Devourers did not come from deep space. They came from the direction of the galactic core, and based on the energy patterns, they are not a small raiding party." "How many?" asked. "I cannot give you an exact number, but the mass displacement suggests thousands of organic vessels, possibly tens of thousands, and they are moving toward the populated sectors." Took a deep breath. He thought about Earth. He thought about the colonies. He thought about every human world scattered across the stars. Then he thought about the billions of alien lives that would be consumed if no one stood against this threat. "Ambassador," said, Humanity is a young species. We have made mistakes. We have been arrogant. We have pushed into places where we were not welcome, but we do not run from fights. We do not surrender to fear. If the coalition cannot defend this galaxy, then humanity will do it for you. Stared at him, you would fight, even knowing what you face. Smiled, it was the smile of a man who had found his purpose. We are humans, Ambassador. Fighting impossible odds is what we do best. He turned to his crew. Lieutenant Porter, send a priority transmission to Earth Command. Tell them the galaxy needs us. Tell them to wake up the fleet. Checked her weapon. Ben started running diagnostics on the ship's systems. Kate continued analyzing the enemy data. They were afraid. They were all afraid, but they were also human, and humans had a long tradition of doing terrifying things anyway. The Devourers had returned to consume the galaxy. They did not know it yet, but they had just made the biggest mistake of their 50,000-year existence. They had given humanity a reason to fight. The United Terran Council chamber in Geneva had not seen this many people since the last interstellar war. Every seat was filled. Military officers in dress uniforms sat beside civilian officials in formal attire. Screens covered every wall, showing real-time feeds from the outer colonies and the latest intelligence on Devourer movements. The air was thick with tension and the hum of urgent conversations. Admiral Chris stood at the central podium. He was 62 years old, with silver hair and a face that had been weathered by decades of service. He had fought in 3 major conflicts and commanded the largest peacetime fleet in human history, but nothing in his career had prepared him for this. The situation is worse than initial reports suggested, Chris said. His voice carried across the chamber without amplification. The Devourer swarm has been tracked moving toward the galactic core at speeds we did not think possible for organic vessels. They have consumed 4 more coalition outposts in the last 72 hours. No survivors, no distress calls. By the time sensors detect them, they are already gone. Secretary of Defense Laura Mitchell leaned forward. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for making hard decisions. What are our options, Admiral? Chris brought up a tactical display. Red dots representing Devourer swarms spread across the map like a disease. Blue dots representing human and coalition assets were scattered and thin. Our conventional forces can engage and destroy individual Devourer vessels. Captain Cole's crew proved that yesterday when they intercepted a scout formation. But we are dealing with tens of thousands of enemy units. Our fleet cannot be everywhere at once. For every swarm we destroy, 10 more slip through our lines. Then we need something bigger than conventional forces, Laura said. Chris nodded slowly. He had hoped this moment would never come. Project Prometheus. The chamber erupted in whispers. Most of the civilians did not know what Prometheus was. They had never been cleared for that level of information. But the military officers knew, and their faces showed a mixture of fear and grim determination. The coalition demanded we shut Prometheus down, said one of the senators. They said it was too dangerous. They said humanity could not be trusted with that kind of power. The coalition is hiding behind their moons while their citizens are being eaten alive, Laura replied coldly. I think their opinions on what we should and should not do have lost some relevance. She stood and addressed the chamber. Project Prometheus was developed in secret over the last 50 years. It involves ships equipped with stellar destabilization technology. In simple terms, these weapons can cause stars to go supernova on command. We built them as a last resort against extinction-level threats. I cannot think of a more appropriate time to use them. The chamber fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. Humanity was about to unleash weapons that could sterilize entire solar systems. There would be no going back from this. The galaxy would never see humans the same way again. Authorize it, the council president said quietly. God help us all, but authorize it. Thousands of light years away, The Relentless hung in space above a dead world. The planet below had once been called Harvest by the who settled it. Now it was a gray wasteland, its atmosphere stripped away, its oceans drained, its surface covered in the dried remains of devourer-feeding pods. Captain Cole stared at the feeds from the ground teams. Beside him, Dr. Kate was cataloging biological samples while Chief Engineer Ben ran damage assessments on the ship's systems. They had been in combat almost continuously for 3 days. Everyone was exhausted. No one was stopping. "Contact," called the sensor officer. Multiple devourer signatures emerging from hyperspace. Bearing 274. Range 50,000 kilometers. Did not hesitate. Battle stations. All hands to combat positions. The Relentless came alive. Lights shifted to combat red. Crew members ran to their stations. Weapons systems powered up. Shields activated. The ship was tired and worn, but it was still dangerous. Sergeant Price arrived on the bridge, her combat armor already sealed. "How many this time?" 15 vessels, said. "Scout swarm, probably looking for survivors to consume. They found us instead." The battle lasted 40 minutes. The Relentless was an outnumbered, but had something the Devourers did not expect. He had human creativity and human rage. He used the debris field as cover, drew the enemy vessels into crossfire positions, and picked them off one by one. When 3 Devourer ships tried to flank his position, he fired the engines at full burn and rammed through their formation, his forward guns blazing. When the last enemy vessel was destroyed, the bridge crew allowed themselves a moment of relief, but was not celebrating. He was staring at the tactical display, his mind working through something. "Kate," he said, "the vessel I rammed, it was larger than the others, different configuration." Kate pulled up the sensor logs, her eyes widened. "You are right. The biological signature shows a unique neural pattern. This was not a standard Devourer ship." "What was it?" Kate took a long moment before answering. "I think it was a queen. The Devourers are a hive mind, Captain. They need central nodes to coordinate their actions. Queens are those nodes. The historical records indicate that killing a queen causes massive disruption to nearby swarms." Stepped forward. "Are you saying we just killed something important?" "More than important," Kate said. "If my analysis is correct, Captain Cole just did something no species has accomplished in 50,000 years. He killed a Devourer queen." Thought about what this meant. The coalition species were paralyzed by fear because they believed the Devourers were invincible. But they were not invincible. They could be hurt. They could be killed. Their queens could be targeted and destroyed. "Send a message to Earth Command," ordered. "Tell them we have found a weakness. Tell them the Devourers can bleed." He looked out at the stars, his jaw set with determination. Humanity had been called the most dangerous species in the galaxy. It was time to prove exactly why. "And tell them to hurry with those Prometheus ships," he added, "because we are going hunting." The coalition species had survived the long night by running and hiding. They had endured through fear and caution. But humanity had not survived their own brutal history through caution. They had survived through aggression, through adaptation, through an absolute refusal to accept defeat. The Devourers were about to learn what it meant to be prey. New Portland was a beautiful world. Green continents floated on blue oceans under a yellow sun that reminded colonists of Earth. 12 million people called it home. They had built cities and farms and schools. They had created a society that balanced technology with nature. They had raised children who had never known war. Now war had found them. The Devourer swarm appeared without warning. 300 organic vessels dropped out of hyperspace and began their descent toward the planet. Planetary defense systems opened fire immediately, destroying dozens of enemy ships, but more kept coming. Always more. Admiral Chris arrived with the defense fleet 4 hours after the attack began. 47 human warships faced a swarm that had already tripled in size as reinforcements arrived from nearby systems. The Devourers had learned from their losses against the Relentless. They knew humanity was dangerous, so they brought overwhelming force. All ships formed defensive line around the evacuation corridor, Chris ordered from the bridge of his flagship, the Valiant. Nothing gets through to those transports. Nothing. The battle that followed would become legend. Human ships fought with everything they had. Captains pushed their vessels beyond all safety limits. Crews worked until they collapsed and then worked some more. The space around New Portland became a graveyard of twisted metal and organic debris. Chris watched his fleet die around him. One by one, the blue markers on his tactical display went dark. The Hammer, the Defiance, the Righteous, ships he had commanded for decades, crewed by men and women he had known since they were cadets, all gone. "Admiral," his first officer said, "we have lost 60% of the fleet. The evacuation transports are still loading. They need more time." Chris looked at the numbers. He did the math. There was only one solution, and it was not one that allowed him to survive. "Signal all remaining ships," he said. His voice was calm. "Continue the defensive line. The Valiant will buy them the time they need." "Sir, that is a suicide run." Chris stood from his command chair. He straightened his uniform and looked around the bridge one last time. These people had served him faithfully. They deserved to know the truth. "The swarm has 3 command vessels directing this attack. If we destroy them, the others will lose coordination. It will buy the transports at least an hour." He paused. "The only way to reach those command vessels is to go through the swarm. The Valiant will not survive the approach, but the mission will succeed." No one argued. No one begged him to reconsider. They simply stood at their stations and prepared to die. The Valiant accelerated toward the heart of the swarm. Devourer ships closed in from all sides, their organic weapons tearing chunks from the human vessel. Bulkheads collapsed. Fires spread through lower decks. The crew fought the damage even as they fired every weapon they had. Chris watched the command vessels grow larger on his screen. He thought about his family back on Earth. He thought about the millions of civilians on the transports behind him. He thought about what humanity meant to this galaxy. "It has been an honor," he said to his crew. The Valiant struck the largest command vessel at full speed. Both ships vanished in a blinding explosion that destroyed 2 more enemy vessels nearby. The shockwave disrupted Devourer formations across the battlefield. On the surface of New Portland, Sheriff Dan Cooper saw the flash in the sky. He did not know who had just died up there, but he knew it had been someone brave, someone human. Dan was 53 years old. He had been a cop in a small town on a peaceful colony world. He had spent his career breaking up bar fights and rescuing lost hikers. He had never expected to lead a war. But the Devourers had landed ground forces in the rural areas, cutting off communities from the main evacuation centers. Thousands of colonists were trapped, unable to reach the transports. So Dan had gathered every armed citizen he could find, and they had gone to save their neighbors. "They are coming through the tree line," called one of his volunteers. She was a school teacher named Lisa. She held her rifle like someone who had never fired a weapon until yesterday, because she had not. Dan looked at his people, farmers with hunting rifles, shop owners with pistols, teenagers with whatever they could find. Against them came creatures from nightmares, biological killing machines that had consumed entire civilizations. "Listen to me," Dan said. "Those things out there have been scaring the galaxy for 50,000 years, but they have never fought humans before. They do not know what we are capable of. They do not know that we would rather die standing than live on our knees, so we are going to show them." The Devourers attacked in waves. They were fast and vicious and utterly without mercy. Dan's people died. They died screaming, they died fighting, they died saving their friends. But for every one that fell, they killed 10 of the enemy. For every position they lost, they made the devourers pay in blood. Lisa died protecting a group of children, emptying her rifle into the creatures until they overwhelmed her. A farmer named Rick died holding a bridge so his neighbors could cross. An old man named George died with his hands around a devourer's throat, squeezing until both of them stopped moving. Dan fought until he had no ammunition left. Then he fought with a knife, then with his hands. When the evacuation shuttles finally arrived, the devourers had been pushed back half a kilometer. The colonists were saved, but the cost had been terrible. The coalition observers who watched the battle feeds could not understand what they were seeing. These were not soldiers. These were civilians, teachers and farmers and shopkeepers. They had no training, no advanced weapons, no tactical support, and yet they had fought like demons. They had died like heroes. Ambassador watched the recording of a human woman, bleeding from a dozen wounds, carrying 2 children toward a shuttle while firing a pistol over her shoulder. The children were not even hers. They were the offspring of a neighbor she had barely known. "Why," whispered, "why would they sacrifice so much for strangers?" Commander Jake stood beside him. He had come to coalition headquarters to coordinate the next phase of the war. He watched his people fight and die on the screen, and he felt pride mixed with grief. "Because that is who we are," Jake said. "We do not fight because we hate what is in front of us. We fight because we love what is behind us, our families, our friends, our future. We will burn down the stars themselves to protect what we love." Finally understood. Humanity was not dangerous because of their weapons or their technology or their aggression. They were dangerous because they cared. They cared so deeply and so fiercely that no enemy, no matter how ancient or powerful, could make them stop. And now that fury was about to be unleashed on the devourers, the galaxy mourned for 3 days. Then humanity stopped mourning and started planning revenge. Vice Admiral Grant stood on the bridge of the Retribution, the largest warship humanity had ever built. Around her, a fleet of 200 vessels waited in formation. They were the best ships, the best crews, the survivors of a dozen battles against the Devourer swarm. They had come here for one purpose. "All ships report ready," said her tactical officer. "The Prometheus weapons are armed and locked. Coalition support fleets are in position." Looked at the navigation display. Before her lay the Devourer home system, a cluster of dying stars that had been dead space on every map for 50,000 years. This was where the creatures had retreated after the long night. This was where they had slept and grown and waited for their chance to consume the galaxy once more. "Signal," the fleet said. "Begin the assault." The coalition had finally joined the fight. Watching humans die for their worlds had shamed them into action. 12 species now stood beside humanity, their ancient fear overcome by something stronger: respect, gratitude, hope. Ambassador commanded the contingent. High Prelate led the swarm carriers. Even the Silent had sent their crystal ships to join the battle. For the first time in galactic history, every sentient species fought as one. Captain Cole brought the Relentless into the vanguard of the assault force. His ship was, and patched from weeks of continuous combat. His crew was exhausted beyond anything they had ever experienced. But they were still fighting. They would always be fighting. "The enemy is forming a defensive perimeter around the primary hive world," reported Dr. Kate. "I am counting over 10,000 vessels, maybe more." "Quality over quantity," said Sergeant Price with a grim smile. "We have proven that already." The battle began with the Prometheus ships firing their star-killing weapons at the outer defensive positions. Suns flared and died. Devourer nests that had existed for were vaporized in seconds. The enemy responded with fury, throwing wave after wave of organic vessels at the Allied fleet. Fought his way through the chaos. His ship moved like a dancer through the destruction, weaving between enemy formations, striking at critical targets. Chief Engineer Ben kept the engines running through damage that should have crippled them, directed weapons fire with deadly precision. Kate analyzed enemy movements and found weaknesses to exploit. But they all knew this battle would not be won by ships alone. The central nexus is the key, Kate said, pointing to the largest structure on the hive world below. It is the primary coordination node for the entire devourer species. If we destroy it, we destroy their ability to function as a hive mind. They will become mindless, easy to hunt down. How do we destroy it? Asked. Kate brought up the weapon she had been developing since the first battle. A biological agent designed to attack devourer neural tissue at the molecular level. It would spread through their organic networks like a virus, shutting down every connected mind within hours. The weapon must be delivered directly into the nexus, she said. Our ships cannot survive the approach. The defenses are too strong. A shuttle might make it, said quietly, if someone flew it manually. Everyone on the bridge understood what he was saying. It was a suicide mission. Whoever delivered the weapon would not be coming back. I will do it, said. Grabbed his arm. Captain, no, we need you. The fleet needs you. The fleet needs the devourers dead more than they need me. Gently removed her hand. I am not asking for volunteers. This is my choice. He looked at his crew one last time. These people had become his family over the past weeks. They had fought together, bled together, lost friends together. He wished he could stay with them until the end. Ben, keep the relentless flying, keep her fighting. Kate, make sure this weapon works, he smiled. And tell Earth that Cole did his job. The shuttle launched from the relentless 10 minutes later. Flew alone, his hands steady on the controls, the biological weapon secured in the cargo bay. Around him, the battle raged. Allied ships fought desperately to clear a path through the devourer defenses. The hive world grew larger in his viewport. He could see the nexus now, a massive organic structure pulsing with dark energy. Devourer interceptors closed in from all sides. His shields failed. His engines screamed. Warning lights flashed across every console. Thought about home. He thought about the people he was saving. He thought about what it meant to be human. This is Captain Cole to all ships, he said into the calm. I am beginning my final approach. It has been an honor to serve with you. Tell them we did not go quietly. The shuttle struck the nexus at full speed. The weapon detonated. A wave of destruction spread outward through every devourer neural connection in the galaxy. The creatures died screaming. On 1,000 worlds in 10,000 ships, the hive mind collapsed. Devourers that had been coordinated killing machines became confused, panicked, easy prey. The Allied fleet destroyed them by the hundreds, then by the thousands. By the time the sun rose over Earth the next day, the devourer species was extinct. The victory celebrations lasted for weeks. Every species in the galaxy honored the humans who had saved them. Monuments were built. Songs were written. Names were added to walls of heroes that would stand for. The coalition drafted a new charter, one that recognized humanity not as a threat to be contained, but as a leader to be followed. When they offered command of the new Galactic Alliance to Earth, the human government accepted with humble grace. Commander Amy Torres, newly promoted after the war, attended the signing ceremony on Prime. Ambassador approached her as the other delegates celebrated. We called you dangerous, he said. We were wrong about what that meant. Amy thought about everyone who had died. Admiral ramming his ship into the enemy. Sheriff Cooper and his volunteers holding the line. Cole flying alone into the heart of darkness. All the names she would never forget. We are dangerous, she said, but not because we destroy, because we protect, because we love, because we will sacrifice everything for the people we care about. Was silent for a long moment. In all my centuries of life, I have never met a species like yours. You feel so deeply. You fight so hard. You give so much. Amy looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, sacrifice had ended a nightmare that had haunted the galaxy for 50,000 years. Somewhere out there, children were growing up on worlds that would have been consumed without human intervention. "That is what makes us human," she said softly. "And that is why we will always be the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not because we want to conquer the stars, but because we will die to protect them." The galaxy had learned a lesson it would never forget. Humanity was not a threat. Humanity was a promise. A promise that no matter what darkness arose, no matter what horror emerged from the void, there would always be someone willing to stand against it. And that someone would be human.